Good morning, afternoon, evening, or night. I hope whatever time it is for you, you are having a very pleasant time. I thought we'd do something different on my channel today, as I am an artist and I think it would be fun, perhaps, to share some of my artwork and some small tips that may help you with your own. This is the piece that we will be working on. It took me collectively 4 hours with some breaks and things in between and some errands that I had to run, but essentially 4.5 hours this took me, and I will show you the process on how I did it. To start with, we obviously have the sketch, how every drawing starts, something I often see happening with people and their sketches is the need of perfection in the sketch. They think everything should look how it's supposed to look, and I'm here to tell you otherwise. As you can see, I've started out with literally scribbles, so in a sense, I just roughly draw what it is I'm wanting to draw using shapes and unneat lines just to get a really rough idea of what it is that I'm trying to draw. And then I will go in with another sketch, one that slightly defines the details of the body, but not completely, because then I'll go in again with another sketch, one where I add most of the details to the body or item that I'm sketching. And then during this phase, it's important to map out how you want your drawing to be, or presented, or layout, or structured, or whatever your vision is. Sketch it down. Again, as you can see on these wings, I blocked it. I used messy blocks with fat strokes just to get the general shape down. And then, of course, comes the line art stage, which for many is the worst stage, but it's actually the one that I enjoy the most. Now, I use Paint Tool Sai to draw, Paint Tool Sai 2 specifically. If your drawing software comes with tools, then utilize them. Use them as much as you can for whatever you can. It can help you make some really nice straight lines or perfect shapes, and on Paint Tool Sai you can actually edit the rulers that you use, which is a magnificent feature. Now, I know there are some artists out there that look down on copy pasting when it comes to doing your artwork, but it really is not that big of a deal. If anything, it just saves you time and helps you have uniform. Everything is the same shape. Personally, I line different elements of my artwork on different layers. This can just help to make it easier to fill and colour and shade and keep everything nice and organised. And if you need to change anything or move anything, then you can do so easily. A lot of art programs will let you sort your layers into folders. This is also helpful and can be done to keep things even more organised and be able to move multiple things at once. For example, you could have a line art layer for the rings and then the colour fill and put that into a folder, and you can move it all at once without having to merge it. It's very good. Personally, when doing colour fill, I prefer to select everything outside of what I want to colour. So all of the dead space around my line art, I will select that and then invert my selection so it is entirely inside the selected area of line art that I want to colour. When it comes to blocking out my colours, I'll colour the initial block that I made before with the majority colour of that item. So, for the bodice here, I've gone completely white because that's what I'll be using, and then I'll go ahead and click all of the other coloured items on that piece of line art thing and then I will colour those separately, but on a separate layer. That way I can edit, colour and whatever I need to that specific part without it affecting the rest of the piece. Right here I realised I made a mistake whilst doing my line art, and there wasn't enough spaces on the flag for all the colours that I needed. And since I'd put everything on separate layers, it was actually fairly easy to fix this, and you'll see that now. And now my line art is fixed, I can carry on with my colour fit. Colouring line art isn't something I typically tend to do, but it can be useful and quite artistic for a piece. And to do this, you can just lock the opacity of the layer that you're working on, or your line art layer, and then colour over the lines with whatever colour you desire. In this case, I did it because I wanted the bodice to appear glowing, and thick black lines isn't going to help that or give me the result that I want. So, I made the lines as light as I could without losing too much detail on the bodice. I then went ahead with a soft brush and added a few extra details to the hair and a soft glow around the shoulders, arms, legs and feet to create the appearance of glowing. Oh, I'm so bad at this talking thing, I'm sorry. Moving on to shading, and the part that I actually hate the most. Shading metal specifically is very tedious, but I ended up enjoying this more than I thought I would. To begin with, I find a swatch, or a group of swatches that I'll use when I shade the metal. That way if I need a colour again, I can simply colour pick it and use it where I need it to be. Now, this isn't a tutorial, so I'm not going to explain how I shaded and why I shaded, other than it's important to follow the light source. And since my light source is within the ring, the outside of the ring is going to be fairly darker, so I swapped to a darker colour and began adding my highlights and then further shading. I tend to bounce around a bit when I do artwork, mainly so I can stay focused on it, because if I do the same thing for too long, it sort of becomes... I lose motivation to keep working on it, so that's why I've randomly gone from shading the gold rings to working on the background, which was a journey. I started by trying a bunch of different brushes just to see what I liked the look of, ultimately to realise it was only going to be covered up by the foreground anyway, so I went with something simple. If you can count adding every star on the image by hand, because I don't have a brush that can do that with Paint or Sai. Fantastic. Again, following the light source and the colours of things, I went for very minimal shading on the wings, purely because they was being lit up by the bodice in the middle, and it's hard to get white things to shade without them looking grey, so I elected to do minimal shading and absolutely no shading on the wings in the back. Next came shading the flag, and rainbow things can be tricky to shade, so I went in with a solid black, and then once I'd done that, I copied the colours from the flag and pasted that above my shading layer, turned on the clipping group, and then just used the colour correction filters to darken the colours so they sit and fit quite nicely with the corresponding colours on the flag below. I also decided to colour the line art for the flag gold because I wanted it to have a nice gold sparkly feel and also connect to the ring somehow, so I figured gold lining would be good. Here you can see me moving the middle eyeball to a new position where I want it to be, and I was able to do that quite easily thanks to using multiple layers and folders, so I could just pick it up and move the whole thing. And now I'm just shading everything else as it needs to be shaded. Again, I'm going to use the copy-paste method quite a few times in this piece, But like I said, it's just easier, and why work harder when you can work smarter? As a personal thing, when complimenting other artists, I prefer to use the word skilled rather than talented. Talented implies that, this came naturally and they didn't need to work for it at all, when I can promise you 99% of artists have worked hard to obtain the skill that they have. So, I prefer to say how skilled an artist is rather than how talented an artist is. For this piece, I wanted the individual eyes to have the LGBTQA+ flags in their irises. Now, to make sure I got these spot on both dimension and colour, I borrowed some flags from a guide that I found online. I pasted them where they needed to go and put them all on the same layer, and then I messed around with the layer settings until I found something where it sat quite nicely without losing the shading that I'd done underneath. And with that, we've finished our art piece. That is my tips and tricks, I guess, or maybe advice, I'm not sure. This is my first time making one of these, and I hope you managed to find help from it, or anything that might help you in your art journey. If not, I hope it was entertaining, and if not, my apologies. I had fun working on this piece, and I had fun making the video, and most importantly, last but not least, happy Pride Month to everyone.